Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Zain Bando. That's Anthony Balester. This is another episode of Forever Power 5. You can follow this show across social media on Twitter and Instagram at FP5ETB, on TikTok, as long as it's still there for all of our viewers in China. At Forever Power 5, no caps or spaces. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Anthony at Balester555. You can follow Zan at ZanBando99. You can follow this show on. You can follow all Empty to Bed. You can watch all Empty to Bed shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty to Bed shows on ETBpodcast.com, and you can listen to Forever Power 5 wherever you get your podcast. And this show is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. College football is on Playback as the Ohio State Buckeyes take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. There's never been a path like this to the national championship as the final teams take the field. Everyone knows this one is bigger. Coverage gets underway at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time with our national championship pre-show, with the game starting at 7:30 Eastern Time. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right. So, how are you guys doing after some epic semifinals matches? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I wish from a work standpoint that I was getting an all Big Ten final, but I will take Ohio State making the national championship. Anthony Ballester's prediction in what was it, mid to late August, early September is slowly but surely coming to fruition. Anthony, I don't know if you placed a future bet on Ohio State at the beginning of the year, but I hope you who did, because you could be cashing in for a lot of money right now. But if you didn't, hopefully you learned your lesson for next season. But at the end of the day, the Notre Dame Penn State was a great game, back and forth, just a lot of theatrics. Drew Howard throwing that interception at the end of the game was just one of the most poetic things I've ever seen. It was almost like once Greg McElroy said that he needs to go on a long drive to try to win the game. It was almost like the double jinx that I've ever seen, and I just thought overall this game in particular lived up to the hype, and it was disappointing how the ratings really took a hit. But overall, in terms of the game itself, it was a great game, and I've said it the last couple of weeks on the show, and I'll continue saying it. I think Notre Dame is a huge underdog story. I think they're a team that needs to be taken seriously, and I wouldn't have believed it in September, but looking over at the full bracket, everything that transpired, Notre Dame is one of the two teams, in my opinion, that deserved to be in this position. And here they are on the eve of the national championship in Atlanta, gunning for its first title since 1988. You couldn't ask for anything more, and it's just been nothing short of a true miraculous Cinderella sports story, especially considering how the season started, losing to Northern Illinois, or hiking off. What is it, 15 wins in a row now? I mean, it's overall a very, very impressive feat, and to even be in this position from their perspective is unbelievable. So even if it's a win or to lose scenario against Ohio State, I think getting to this point, they should be very proud of what they accomplished, and so is Penn State. I mean, we'll talk about them in a little bit, but Penn State has so much production coming back for next year that they're definitely going to be a Big Ten favorite to look out for, and this is not going to be the last time, in my opinion, this iteration of the college football playoff that we will see Penn State in the CFP semifinals. So overall, very, very exciting stuff, and I do believe that the two best teams from this 12-team bracket deserve to be in this spot, and here we are on the near eve of it. So what did you guys think?
Did you think these were the two best teams? I think Ohio State is the best team, I would say. I don't know if Notre Dame's the second best team. I'm not really convinced of that.
Interesting.
I would say
they're playing like it though. They're beating everybody they're supposed to beat.
I'm not saying they're a bad team. I'm saying I actually kind of think Texas might actually be the next best team.
Well,
I that's what I think that very like I actually think Texas would beat Notre Dame or Penn State if they played head to head. I think. But go ahead, Anthony.
Well, Notre Dame did beat Georgia, and we've seen Texas struggle with Georgia. So you definitely make the argument that Notre Dame could be better than
transitive property argument.
But you could make the argument. But I mean, we're splitting hairs here. I mean, Notre Dame definitely has earned it, but there's definitely no denying. I mean, I've been saying it pretty much all year that Ohio State's the most stacked team, pretty much on the offense and defensive side of the ball. I'll talk about them later on in the show. But for these two teams, in particularly Penn State, I think next year is going to be a tremendous year for Penn State. You've seen in that game with the struggles that Drew Allard had. He has the potential. I mean, the guy has Josh Allen type potential with his size, his strength, his athletic ability. If he could just put it all together and play consistently with his accuracy, he could be a first overall pick. But you see him with those inaccuracies, missing throws, throwing those bad interceptions. You can see why he's coming back for another year. But this Penn State team, I mean, obviously they're going to lose their best player in Abdul Carter, who could potentially be the top pick in this year's draft. But they're going to pretty much get all their top players outside of that. And Penn State usually recruits and replaces their pass rushers pretty well. So I think they'll be good at that position. So it sucks for Penn State to lose right now, but I think next year they'll be even better. And Notre Dame, man, I mean, what Marcus Freeman has done with this team has been nothing short but spectacular. Like I said, it feels like he's an upgrade over Brian Kelly. I mean, Marcus Freeman has become one of the best coaches in all of college football, and that's why we're seeing NFL teams potentially be interested in him. So I think Notre Dame's got a shot, but they definitely, I think, overachieved this year. And win or lose in the championship game, it's been a success.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a great year for both teams. It's been a great year for both. I would say, if anything, I think Notre Dame is. Yeah, Marcus Freeman kind of did the impossible. He turned Notre Dame into like lovable underdogs, which is like one of the only times that's ever happened. I can't remember any point in college football history where like it seemed like the country was rooting for Notre Dame. Usually they're more like a hated favorite, typically. I just think that's sort of funny about that. I mean, in terms of that Penn State game, I think like people are crushing James Franklin. And you're right, Anthony. I mean, like one thing James Franklin does really, really well is he recruits at a high level. Like even though they're losing Abdul Carter, there's going to be other Abdul Carters coming in. Like I don't, maybe not next year exactly, but like they're going to have a whole lot of good players. It's not like when a small school, it's not like Boise State with Ashton Jeanty, for instance. Like Ashton Jeanty's leaving and they're not going to have an Ashton Jeanty next year. And that's going to make a big hit. And their team is going to take a big hit. Penn State is not the same way. Penn State recruits at a high level. James Franklin often makes boneheaded decisions in games, but it's undoubtedly true that he's one of the best recruiters in college football. And people are crushing James Franklin for this loss. Here's what I'll say. And I said this on my other show too. I don't think this was like a heartbreaking loss. I mean, for Penn State fans, I also don't think it was a bad loss either. It was not a bad loss. Notre Dame's a good team, and they lost in the college football playoff semifinals. It's not really that bad of a loss. If things go a little differently, maybe if their defensive back doesn't fall, maybe if Drew Aller actually doesn't try to make a play there and instead just throws the ball away, which would have been much smarter. Maybe Penn State comes back and wins that game. That game was very 50-50. It could have gone either way. I mean, it started off with Notre Dame favored by like 1.5 points. Then by the time the game started, Penn State was favored by 1.5 points. I think both those teams were very like evenly matched. And that game really could have just gone either way. It really could have gone either way. I think James Franklin is being criticized a lot more because he's been the head coach at Penn State a lot longer than Marcus Freeman was at Notre Dame.
I think, to stop you there for a second, I think the issue that people are running into with James Franklin is in that position, you could have just done the conservative thing and fallen on the ball 4 times and played for overtime. And instead, they risked taking a chance that ultimately they couldn't get back, and it led to an eventual game-losing field goal. That's where that's where I think people are a little bit puzzled, probably because they didn't think that Penn State needed the offense to go into that pressure cooker situation and do that, and clearly they didn't, because that's how they ended up losing the game anyway. So
I think that if they had done that and then lost in overtime, they would be criticized. James Franklin would be criticized a lot worse than he was, because they had enough time. It's not like there were 5 seconds on the clock. Like, they had enough time to get down the field. It was just that play was bad. That play was bad. Not only was it a bad throw by Drew Aller, and not just that, a bad decision to try and make that play. It was also a terrible route run by the wide receiver, which I think that also needs to be pointed out. All that taken into account. Remember when John Fox, when the Broncos were playing the Ravens, the year the Ravens last won the Super Bowl, and they, instead of trying to get down the field, they took a knee to play for overtime.
And they ended up
and then they lost, and John Fox got killed for it. That's what would have happened if James Franklin had done that. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to do that because they just had to be smart with their play calls.
Right.
And, they didn't complete a pass to a wide receiver the whole game because Penn State doesn't have the best wide receivers. Their top target is their tight end. Like, they were running back first, tight end second, wide receiver third team. And going to I think it was like their third receiver option on a play like that probably wasn't all that smart. So the issue is not that they tried to score. The issue was just, if anything, the decision making in that situation. And a lot of that is a little bit on Drew Aller too. A lot of it.
Right.
And look, Drew Aller didn't really play that bad of a game. He was just bad situationally, which we see a lot. Like, there are a lot of times.
And he even admitted it after the game. Like, he wished, for instance, that he had that throw back, and he was just going through his reads, and he made a split-second decision, and it ended up being the biggest mistake of the game. So
it ended up being the biggest mistake of the game. In terms of how Penn State's season is, like, if I'm going to rate their season, I think they're just sort of like they kind of did what they were supposed to do.
It was a good year.
It was a good year, undoubtedly. And by the way, look, if Penn State hadn't made it to the playoffs with 12 teams, that would have been a big problem for Penn State. But they did make it, and which is what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to make it with a 12-team playoff. I mean, they did get an easy draw in the first 2 games. I would understand. Like, I think James Franklin would be in a lot of trouble if they totally laid an egg this game and they were unprepared or something like that. But I don't think just losing the game means his job is going to be in jeopardy. I don't think that's totally accurate either. I think he's going to be there for a long time, and I think eventually James Franklin's going to win a national championship. I think it's eventually. I think it's going to happen.
Okay. I could see it too, just considering that, I did take a glance at Penn State's schedule, and they do have some favorable home games. They do get Oregon at home too, which is obviously going to be tough, but they avoid some draws this year that they played last year and obviously did really well in. But I think, with their schedule easing up just a little bit next year, and with the talent that they have coming back, I think they're due for a potential replica season at the end of this year, where maybe they could just take it a step further. You never know.
And by the way, for the next couple of years, they're going all Iowa at Penn State. They're going all Iowa. They're going. They're having their non-conference schedule is going to be such a joke for the next couple of years. Next year, their non-conference schedule is Nevada, Florida International, Villanova, Marshall, and then the next year after that, Marshall, Temple, Buffalo. In 2027, Syracuse, Delaware, and Temple. And then in 2028, Ball State, Syracuse, and UMass. So in the next 4 years, the best team that they're going to be playing in the non-conference is Syracuse.
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Considering that who knows if Fran Brown will even be there by that point. He may not even be there. So
but yeah, and Notre Dame, obviously, that they just even if they lose bad to Ohio State in the national championship game, they also had a great year. Marcus Freeman did a tremendous job as a head coach.
I agree 100%. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that sentiment too. I think he had one of the best coaching jobs in the country, right up there with Kurt Zanetti and a couple others. He did a fantastic job. I mean, he took a Notre Dame team that, near the end of the Brian Kelly era had little to no identity, and he's finally gotten them over the hump. It took him a few years.
Yeah.
It took him a couple bowl losses, in there too, when you factor everything in. But now it seems like he has his team in the right direction. And you could say all you want about their schedule being soft or whatever, but they won the games they were supposed to. And I'm sure that they would love to have their own loss back. So,
and by the way, the fact that they beat Indiana, Georgia, and Penn State in the playoffs, that's not a soft schedule. So, if they had done that in the regular season, we'd say, look, Notre Dame has some great wins. So it's not like they're not like Indiana. They were only able to win games against their soft schedule and got killed against any good team.
Right, exactly.
Right. And by the way, even though people say Notre Dame plays a soft schedule, which they do usually because they control their own schedule, like almost all of it, but there's a lot of teams in conferences that play easy every year that play easier schedules than Notre Dame does. That's also undeniable.
For sure.
Ohio State beats Texas in the semifinals. Ohio State beating Texas. Like I said, I think Ohio State looks like the hottest team in the country.
They do. Now. This was a validation game for Ohio State. They lost to Michigan Thanksgiving weekend. And based on, accounts of what Kirk Herbstreit has said and stuff like that, they said they had 4 games to go. They said they weren't going to focus on anything else but themselves, and they were going to go out and kick ass. And they've essentially done all that and more throughout this playoff run. And to beat Texas in Dallas the way that they did, to have it end with a strip sack fumble from Jack Sawyer, a guy that was scrutinized and ridiculed after the Michigan game, to have his coming home moment, and if you will, not a coming home moment, but to strip sack his former roommate to win the Cotton Bowl. You can't write a better script than that. So
yeah, that's for everybody who, in case you forgot about that, Quinn Ewers actually was at Ohio State before he went to Texas
for like a semester or something.
I mean, by the way, it is worth. I will say, Ohio State won that game, but they didn't play a great game.
No, they didn't. But they did. They did what they needed to do, and they frustrated the Texas offense that essentially all year looked like a runaway train that had no signs of stopping at all.
Like, I think in the first half they left a lot on the table. Ohio State, they left a lot on the table.
I agree. Anthony, what do you think? What did you think of this overall performance by Ohio State, and just overall the way they were able to shut down a Texas offense that was scoring at will against Arizona State and was, relatively held in the second half, and tried to drive down and ultimately lost. What were your overall thoughts?
I thought the pass rush for Ohio State was probably the best pass rush I've seen by any team all season. The way that pass rush was able to dominate, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuamalo, Tyleik Williams at defensive tackle. I mean, we can't forget, Texas has first-round NFL tackles and NFL offensive linemen. And Ohio State went out there and made them look like undrafted free agents. I mean, what Ohio State's been doing is unbelievable. And the way that pass rush has really stepped up. I mean, obviously, you got to talk about Jack Sawyer. He was the MVP of the game. But what this team did as a whole defensively, I mean, they were giving Quinn Ewers fits. And I said coming in the game, if you give Quinn Ewers fits, he starts to turn the ball over. And obviously, Jack Sawyer was able to force the turnover, even though ultimately the offensive lineman just straight up just got beat. Can't really blame Quinn Ewers on that one. But, man, this defensive line and pass rush was unbelievable. But one thing that definitely stood out as well is Texas was able to shut down Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Mbuka, and Ohio State was still able to put up 28 points because they got other guys like Carnell Tate, who, a lot of people may not know who he is, but he's a potential NFL first-round pick in a couple years. The only thing is he's 19 years old, and he has other first-round, second-round picks playing with him as well. So this Ohio State team just has so much talent across the board that even if you shut down one or two great players, they can beat you in so many ways. And, it's unfortunate for Texas because their season pretty much ended the same way as it did last year, losing in the Final Four of the college football playoffs. But, hey, I mean, this is what they were able to do. And Ohio State just at the end of the day was the better team. And we've seen all season Texas has had their struggles. And honestly, I'm not even sure if they were a top 4 team. They had a lot of struggles this year, and they didn't really have a super hard schedule as well. But I'm glad Ohio State won, and they proved that they're probably the best team in the country.
Yeah, well said, man, for sure.
Based on the way they're playing, I mean, I think Texas is – I think they deserve some credit. I think they were a top 4 team. But, they could have lost to Arizona State if they made the correct targeting call. So who knows what would have happened then.
Oh, yeah. I think people would be looking at Sark very differently if Arizona State had gone on to win, assuming that the call was made correctly, which obviously it wasn't. So, and even as someone who had zero dog in that game, when I saw that, I'm like, you could be a Texas fan, you could be an Arizona State fan. There's no way by logic that wasn't targeting, and I don't believe I had a chance to fully say that a week ago. But now that the dust is fully settled, I can tell you that I think Texas was very lucky to be able to get it out of that unscathed. And yeah, I agree. I do think even though they were one of the bye teams that ultimately, or was one of the non-bye teams that ultimately lost and didn't make it to the championship, I still think that they were one of the best teams in the country for sure, though.
Yeah, and I think Sark deserves a lot of credit too. I think Sark, he's done a great job at Texas. He doesn't seem to be getting scrutinized as much as like a James Franklin or Ryan Day has been criticized in the past. But I do think he deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to do at Texas. I mean, people forget how bad Texas was before he came along.
I got a question for both of you guys, though, before we move on. You guys think Arch Manning ultimately could do more and take this team further than what Quinn Ewers was able to take this Texas team the last 2 years as the starting quarterback?
I think he could, as long as he keeps his ego in check. I think he has a huge, family lineage to live up to. I think if he's around the right people and his mindset is all clear and stuff, yeah. I mean, I think he can take the team as far as he wants to take them. So,
yeah, I think so too, except we have a very small sample size of what he's done. So we don't really know yet, but I think he probably can. I mean, he was let's put it this way. If he played this year, let's say Quinn Ewers got hurt and then Arch Manning took over for him, they'd probably be in a similar position. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but he probably I think he would have been he was probably one of the best backups in college football. So I don't even think it would have hurt Texas that much.
Because I think if Arch Manning wasn't on the Texas roster right now, I'm not sure if Quinn Ewers would be leaving.
I don't know about that.
There's a good chance he'd be leaving anyway. Because he's good enough. Look, maybe, but there's a good chance he would be leaving anyway. It's already been his third year at Texas. There's a good chance he'd want to just declare for the draft anyway.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, based on the 2026 draft class, he wouldn't have the ceiling that he would if he came out this year. So I think he ultimately ended up making the right decision.
Yeah, so that transitions perfectly with Quinn Ewers declaring for the draft. He He turned down an $8 million NIL deal
with another program allegedly. Isn't that?
But do we know which program it was?
I don't think so. No.
So we don't know what school it was. So it would have been one of those collectives.
I would guess, yeah.
And to declare for the draft. I mean, you can make more money eventually, at least as even as just a serviceable backup quarterback. He doesn't even have to have a good NFL career to make a whole lot of money. But if I were, and look, he's also still young. He's 21. Most guys in his position, I feel like, would have stayed at college another year.
So according to USA Today's Matt Hayes, he said, if this is quote, if Ewers hits the college football open market, which he obviously didn't, we obviously know what happened to him, but it says there will be multiple blue blood deep pocket teams bidding for him, including but not limited to Ohio State, Georgia, and USC. Obviously, none of what's happened, but it looks like those were the bidding war 3 schools that were interested in him before he decided to declare. So
Ohio State, you said Ohio State, Georgia, USC.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
See, I think you guys are wrong. I think Quinn Ewers made a mistake. I mean, I think Quinn Ewers should have went back to college.
I agree. I didn't say I agree with you.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys.
Yeah, I
okay.
I don't agree with you. I think he made the right decision to go pro simply given the fact that he had been in college for 3 years, and could you even remotely imagine if he came back and got injured and it impacted his entire senior season? It would have been bad. So
I mean, I think he should have went back to college. I mean, you got a guy like Carson Beck, who's a year older, who's been in college a year longer, and he entered the draft and then realized how much of a bad mistake that is, and go back to college and make a crap load of money. I mean, why go to the NFL, be a second, third, fourth round pick? What do you get? I mean, obviously your total contract over the 4 years will be a decent amount of money, be a couple $1 million, but you could go back to college and make the same amount in just one season. And either way, you can still go back to the NFL and probably be drafted in the same round anyways. I think Quinn Ewers will probably be drafted the same this year as he will next year. He's not a first-round pick either way. So he's probably going to be somewhere in that middle, the second to fourth round. So you might as well go back to college. And even draft experts like Mel Kiper have said, why not go back and get the development? The more starts you get, the better you're prepared. Look at guys like Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels, who came out in the NFL as 24-year-old rookies. And look how great they played. So the more time in college, the better, honestly. And he is real young. He's a 21-year-old kid. So he's a lot younger than some of these other guys who come in out of high school at already 19. Quinn Ewers reclassified and went to college a year early. So we got to factor that in as well. So if I was him, I would have went back to college. I would have took a crap load of money and tried to just develop more.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that would have been better. And not only that, but like my thought process is, now I don't know if this is what he's thinking, it's almost like bigger fish in a smaller pond type of thing. Now, a sneaky suspicion tells me that of those 3 schools, something tells me USC might have been at the top of that list.
That would have been my guess too.
Something tells me it may have been USC. I just feel
because given 2 things. Number one, given the USC brand tradition, they always try to make big splashes like that. And number 2, I mean, this is just being honest. Like, I still think there are people out there who don't fully believe in the Lincoln Riley experiment, and this would have been almost like a cover his ass kind of move, but it obviously didn't happen. So
yeah, no, I get totally. And by the way, but like, just my thought process is, it's just like, I would love to be a college athlete for as long as I can do it. Like, that is like such a good life. Like, if as the star quarterback especially at a place like USC, where you don't have as much pressure on you at USC as you might have at Texas, and you're in like LA with great weather and a whole bunch of stuff to do. Like, that just sounds like a great life in a lot of ways. And it's also just like bigger fish in a smaller pond. Would you rather be like the starting quarterback in college, or like a backup in the NFL that nobody really believes in yet? And at 21, you're probably not going to see the field unless the starter gets hurt. And you don't even know, if you're going to even be drafted into a good team. I think if he stayed another year and improved, he'd likely improve his draft stock a whole lot. I mean, he'd likely get drafted higher.
I just want to make one point about Quinn Ewers too. When I was saying earlier about him having Arch Manning being on the roster and him wanting to return, in my opinion, I think that's what factored into this ultimately. I think the reason why Quinn Ewers turned down the money, turned down the transfer portal, and went to the NFL is because I think deep down, after spending the amount of time he has with the Texas Longhorns, I think deep in his heart, he wanted to finish his career with Texas. I don't think he wanted to transfer to another university and have the Texas fans, cannot forget about him, but ultimately they would have to kind of root against him. And ultimately, maybe he will lose a lot of, what he has with the love of the fans at Texas. And ultimately, I think if Arch Manning wasn't at Texas, I think he would just went back to Texas another year because that's how much he loves the Longhorns. But obviously, Arch Manning's there, so he can't come back as a starting quarterback. So ultimately, I think Arch Manning being at Texas is why Quinn Ewers turned down the money and went to the draft.
Yeah, that certainly is a possibility. It might be something he cares about. I mean, I wouldn't care about it, but it might be something he cares about. I know he's from Texas originally. So we have to talk about the national championship game, Ohio State versus Notre Dame. Ohio State are 8-point favorites. And the line has kind of shifted a lot in the past week. It was a little higher before, and then it went down to like 6. Now it's back up to 8. So Zan, what are your thoughts on this?
Sure. Well, it's interesting you mention the line first because I've seen it anywhere from 6 all the way to 9 at some books, which is pretty interesting. So I don't know if there's some sort of injury that's like not public yet or will be public closer to the game, but the line moving, by a field goal essentially in the last 4 to 5 days is very, very alarming.
It's probably just a lot of people betting on it.
Could make sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, I think it's kind of a bummer a little bit that these are two Midwestern teams that have to go play in Atlanta. I just think the setting of this game doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's not in, it's not in Indianapolis or, or one of these other like Midwestern territories or even remotely like a major market, like, even like a New York or something like that. But that's just either here or there. That's how the playoff works. Neutral side or not, though, I just think Ohio State overall is the better team. I think when their offense is in sync, like it was in the first round in the Rose Bowl, I think they're very difficult to beat. And I've seen as many pundits say that if Notre Dame doesn't score between 17 and 20 points, it's going to be a long day. And I would concur with them. And I actually don't think that Notre Dame is going to be able to cover this number here. I think Ohio State is a team on a mission. I think they're a team on a mini revenge tour. And I think that this is the game where Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka show out. And also think this is the game where Riley Leonard gets sacked at a minimum 3 times. And Ohio State is going to win this one. I'm going to say by about. I'm going to say they barely cover this number, but they do enough to be comfortably ahead the whole game. I'm going to say the final score, and hopefully I'm as close to head on as possible. If you guys were paying attention, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers score before Tampa Bay lost, I was really, really close to getting that one almost exactly right. I guess I was sort of a semi mini genius on that, but I do think Ohio State does enough to get this done. I think the final score is going to be 27-17.
27-17. All right.
Mm-hmm. And also, one other thing I forgot to add, I do think that Ohio State will have to come from behind early in the second quarter to take the lead for the remainder of the game.
Oh, I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think they will be. I don't think that will happen because Ohio State lately has gotten into like one thing that they've been doing is that they've been getting out. They've been starting off very strong and getting off to big leads quickly.
That's true. That's true. I just think Notre Dame is going to keep it somewhat competitive for at least a half.
Yeah, I don't think Notre Dame's going to get blown out either. But yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, of course I gotta go Ohio State. I mean, I said preseason Ohio State was going to win the national championship, and I got to stick with them now. And I think they're going to win and cover. I do think Notre Dame defensively can do the best they can to prevent this from being an absolute complete blowout. I don't think it's going to be, double digits. I do think it's going to be real close to that 8, probably right around 9, maybe 10. But I think they'll do enough to keep it close. But I think what scares me for Notre Dame is they have a very young and right now injured offensive line. And obviously their offensive line is not nearly as good as what Texas offensive line is. And we've seen what Ohio State's defensive line was able to do to them. So I think Notre Dame will be able to do enough defensively to maybe slow down a little bit, Cardinal, Tate, Emeka Mbuka, Smith, and Judkins. But ultimately, Ohio State's defense, again, is going to be way too much. And I don't see any way they can protect Riley Leonard. And Jeremiah Love, I think, is still dealing with a slight injury. So I don't think he's 100%. And, I know Notre Dame's got some decent receivers, but none of their receivers really, truly scare me. So I don't think Notre Dame offensively is going to be able to put up much points at all. I do think overall it'll be a low-scoring game, but give me Ohio State to win the national championship and cover.
Yeah, so there's a lot of angles. There's a whole lot of angles to this game. One of them is Ohio State. There's a lot of things about Ohio State that Notre Dame is going up against that they haven't seen before. That they haven't quite seen before. They haven't gone up against a team like Ohio State that has as good of a defense. Notre Dame has not played a team with as good of a defense as Ohio State. The only team that probably comes close would be like Penn State. But they haven't played a team with like Ohio State's probably got the best front in the country. They haven't played a team. They certainly have not played a team with the wide receivers that Ohio State has. Ohio State has the most stacked receiving core in the country. Nothing like Notre Dame has played against. And not to mention their secondary, not exactly their strong suit compared to their front seven. Like Notre Dame's front is much better than their secondary. The running backs, I mean, the only other team that has the running backs that Ohio State has that comes close, I would say, is Penn State. That's the only other team that really kind of comes close. Just in general, Ohio State's offense is way, way better than any team that Notre Dame has played against. Not even just players individually, just the system itself. I mean, there is no team that Notre Dame has played that has the explosive offense that Ohio State has. Like, I just don't think it's come close. The other thing is, I really think that Riley Leonard is going to be forced to throw a lot because they're going to get a lot of pressure on him. Like Notre Dame's offensive line is going to have a lot of trouble against Ohio State's defense, and Riley Leonard is going to be forced to throw a lot. And Riley Leonard is not the best passer. Notre Dame's pass game is not great. Riley Leonard is a run-first quarterback, and if they're going to force him to throw a lot, I think there's going to be it could be a long day for Notre Dame. I think it could be a long day for them if Riley Leonard is forced to throw a lot, and not because he wants to, but because he has to, and that's going to be, I think, a big problem. So I like Ohio State minus the 8 points. I think they win at a score similar to what Zan said. I would probably say something like 30-20.
Okay, I can see that too.
I'm not saying that I think that Notre Dame will be able to keep it somewhat close. Will be able to keep it competitive, but eventually, I think Ohio State is just going to kind of break off. And I think their offense is going to break away at some point.
Okay, we'll see.
Yeah, so all of us, it's a sweep. We're all taking Ohio State.
I just want to say quickly that Will Charlton is saying that Ohio State's going to win, but Notre Dame's going to cover. So he's got Ohio State no cover.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so Will's pick is Ohio State to win, but no cover.
Yeah, right. So we're in an almost we're essentially an almost sweep because he isn't going for the outright cover, but it's basically a sweep at the same time. So
yeah, the question about this is, I mean, by the way, this national championship game, it's like the Redemption Bowl.
It is.
It's the second chance bowl. Both these teams got second chances that they previously wouldn't have gotten under the previous system. The question I have is, if Ohio State beats Notre Dame, does that make up for their loss against Michigan?
Oh,
100%. 100%.
You say yes?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
National championship means more than anything.
I agree. However, a lot of Ohio State fans hate Michigan. Beating Michigan means the world to a lot of them. I agree. I think that if they had, I would agree that like after they lost to Michigan, at that point it's just sort of like, all right, in order to get right with the fans, you have to win the national championship. Not only win the national championship, but look like the most dominant team in the whole playoffs, and against good teams too. It was against good teams. All right, so that looks like a clean sweep. Some more transfer news. Carson Beck is transferring to Miami. I think, what was it, like a $4 million NIL deal?
Sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a $4 million NIL deal.
And some know this, but some don't. I think another reason why he decided to transfer to Miami was to be extremely close to his girlfriend,
who is on the basketball team.
Yep, Hannah Cavender, yeah.
Yeah, on the Miami basketball. And even then, it's like Miami's a pretty good place to be.
Right.
When you're, how old is he, 24?
Mm-hmm.
When you're his age, it's a pretty good place to be. I think it's a smart move on his part to stay in college another year and be the starting quarterback. I just wonder how good Miami's going to be. I think, like, my thought process is like, all right, it's a great move on his part, but what does this do for Miami? Is also,
I mean, they got some good young talented receivers that are going to be returning next year. Obviously, they could get some other players in the transfer portal, but I think Miami may not be as talented as they were this year, but could still be talented enough to at least give Carson Beck at least a fighting chance to maybe try to improve his draft stock. But this was definitely a no-brainer. I mean, when he initially entered the NFL draft, guys like Todd McShay were bashing him, saying, you're coming off of injury. You just had the worst season of your career. Why would you go to college, or why would you leave college and give up all that money? Now,
I'm sure he eventually had smarter people around him telling him the exact same thing that you're saying too. After a while.
Of course, and like I said, we live in an entirely different era now with this NIL money. Like I said, as a college athlete, if you're not a first-round pick, you stay in college as long as you can. And that's why you got guys like Travis Hunter out there saying, man, if Carson Beck maybe be able to get $10 million, man, I should go back to the school under the transfer portal and get $100 million. Obviously, we're joking, but that's just the mentality that these guys have now. And if I was a college athlete, I would try to make as much money as I can.
Right.
Yeah. Take advantage of the system, which allows you to do that now. I absolutely would do that too. It's also, I think, proof that they should give Reggie Bush his Heisman back. Now that you have a quarterback like Carson Beck being able to make millions of dollars just by transferring to Miami, and Reggie Bush can't get his Heisman back, it's completely nuts. I just think it definitely is a smart move on his part. Some more news. Kyren Lacy, possibly involved in negligent vehicular homicide. I don't know what it is with so many college football with so many SEC players that are just maniac drivers. Most of them play at Georgia. It's actually become like a running joke that Georgia players are always getting into car accidents. I haven't looked into this case too much. I haven't
either.
I know that there was an arrest warrant issued for him. This is gonna hurt him. This is just so. You ever heard the saying that, like, a smart person learns from a dumb person learns from their own mistakes, and a smart person learns from other people's mistakes?
Mm-hmm.
As a star player, I think you should really try to learn from other people's mistakes. Like, we haven't seen this type of thing before from any other notable star wide receivers killing people with their cars. It's just stupid decision making when he just has the world at his fingertips.
Yeah, and he just had a breakout season. I mean, you got to remember, this guy sat at LSU behind Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., waited his time. Those guys finally went off to college. He got to have his breakout season, was looking like he could be a potential second and third round pick in the NFL draft, and then pretty much throws it all away. I mean, obviously, thank God they said there was no drugs or alcohol potentially involved in this case. But according to what I've read, I've heard that there was multiple people who caught him recklessly driving on the highway. He caused another car to abruptly stop, which caused a crash, injuring multiple people. Then he crashed into somebody, killing a former veteran, drove off and did not report it or call emergency services. So
that's exactly what I'm reading.
And was he apparently going like 100 miles an hour?
I'm not sure how fast he was going. I know he was going in the wrong lanes, and he just wasn't driving the proper way.
No. Based on the article that I currently have up, it doesn't say anything about a mile per hour figure.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I can't say that.
Okay then. But he was driving recklessly.
And this is the part that's the most alarming. It says Lacy allegedly crossed into the wrong lane to pass other vehicles, resulting in multiple vehicles swerving to avoid a head-on collision. Two of the vehicles had a head-on collision with each other, resulting in the death of a 78-year-old man and injuries to two others.
Wow.
That's the most alarming part of the whole incident.
Yeah. So for any other players, just learn from these mistakes. Learn from Kyren, Lacy, and don't do it.
And learn from guys like Kyren, Lacy. Learn from guys like Henry. Learn from all these guys that have gotten themselves in severe trouble because
Jalen Carter.
Right, and Jalen Carter.
It just sucks that the individual who, sadly lost his life, him and his family can't learn from this. And it just sucks that some idiot's mistake has to cost someone's life time and time again. And I just wish people could learn and these things didn't have to happen.
Yeah, and it's not even like that guy made a mistake. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just driving.
Well said. Well said.
So there's some coaching rumors. Deion Sanders. There's so many rumors about Deion Sanders to the Cowboys. Just like there's a lot of rumors of Shedeur Sanders going to the Giants. The weird thing, would be really weird if Deion Sanders went to the Cowboys and Shedeur Sanders played for the Giants. Now, I'm not saying I think that's going to happen, but that would be kind of interesting because
that would be very strange. Number one, but number two, from a TV executive.
That is a wet dream for the TV executives.
From a TV executive standpoint, that's dollar signs.
But to me, the reason that would be so funny to me, because it would be weird even if Deion Sanders was a head coach of a team that's not in the division. But Deion Sanders is a bit of a LeVar Ball dad.
He is. He absolutely is.
He's a bit of a LeVar Ball. Now, he's earned it more than LeVar Ball has. LeVar Ball is only known for being the crazy parent, whereas Deion Sanders obviously is a celebrity in his own right. But he's going to be, I guarantee you whatever team Shedeur Sanders goes to, Deion Sanders is going to be the overly involved parent, without question. And it's going to be a bit of a circus. So imagine if that were to happen, if he were to go to the Giants and Deion Sanders was coaching the Cowboys. It's he would imagine that that would be such a weird dynamic. If the Cowboys played the Giants, the Cowboys would beat the Giants, and then afterwards Deion Sanders would criticize the Giants for something that they did wrong involving his son or something like that, as if he was rooting for the Giants. It would be such a weird dynamic. I don't think that this is going to happen. I really don't think this is going to happen yet. I think it might happen eventually. I think that it will likely be the case that him and his son might be like a package deal. It might almost be like Bronny James in a sense, that he was like a package, like they were doing LeBron a favor. I could see something like that happening with whatever team Deion Sanders would end up coaching at. But that's only if it were to happen this year. Afterwards, obviously, there's something they can do.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Deion Sanders already said multiple times that he loves Boulder, Colorado. I mean, he pretty much gets to be the king around there to do everything exactly his way. But I think the Dallas Cowboys would probably be the only team I could see Deion Sanders coaching for, just because it's the only team that has the brand that's big enough to fit Deion Sanders. He's played for that team before. And obviously, Deion said the only way he would even consider the NFL is the coach's son. So, like you said, Nick, it would have to be a package deal. But unlike Bronny James, Shedeur Sanders is actually worth a first-round pick.
Right.
But the only way that would happen is the Dallas Cowboys would have to try to trade up in the draft. And I think it would turn into a scenario where pretty much they would have to trade their first-round pick and Dak Prescott away. And then you end up with Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders. I'm not sure if that necessarily makes their team that much better, but it'd be certainly interesting and it'd be fun to talk about.
ESPN would go crazy.
Oh yeah.
You think that might not lead the news for a few nights?
For a few months.
Yeah. That's just like the now you're saying that's what he said. He said. Doesn't mean he's telling the truth. I mean, he doesn't mean he's being honest just because he says he loves Boulder, Colorado. Doesn't mean he's not going to dart out right if he gets a good enough opportunity, even in college. Like, I don't think he's going to be at Colorado that much longer just because he says he likes the job. Just because he says he likes Boulder. And I'm sure he does like Boulder, but, you know, it's almost like he might want to get a better job than the head coach at Colorado.
Right. I mean, as we've talked about a zillion times, if he wasn't the coach of Colorado, I don't think Colorado would be as relevant as Colorado is right now.
No, not even close. And even if he were to leave after like 4 years, I mean, it would be like Colorado would still. I think Colorado would be thankful for him. I think they would. Like just for what he's done. Like, what a joke of a program it was 2 years ago. They were like the laughing stock of college football 2 years ago, and he brought them back to relevancy and almost made them a playoff team. Maybe if they had beaten Kansas, they could have been a playoff team. I mean, they wouldn't have gone very far, but still, that still is something for a team like Colorado. And there were also rumors that the Bears are interested in Marcus Freeman. I don't know if I don't know how true this is exactly.
I mean, it's being reported by credible sources. I just don't see how he leaves college. I think it'd be a stupid mistake.
I agree. It's only his third season at Notre Dame.
And I just don't see how right now, given his very young coaching age, how he fits the NFL realm at this point. There's no way he won't be an NFL head coach. I could totally see it. But I feel like this is way too early. If it was, 2030 or something, I would have a different opinion. If it's 2030 and he's gone to 3 national championships and he's won one of them and he feels like he's in a good spot, that's fine. But I feel like this is way too early.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. He's very young. I mean, I've heard a lot of people, credible people, say that they think he can be the next Sean McVay. I mean, he's very highly respected, and he's looked at one of these next young up and coming coaches. But at the end of the day, he's still very young in his coaching tenure. I would like to see maybe 3 to 5 more years at Notre Dame. He's only been there a few years. I mean, the job he's done, you can't say anything wrong about it, but it's just way too soon. And I think I would like to see him in college a few more years. I know as a player, he did play partly for a season for the Chicago Bears, very briefly. But I think the NFL is a few years away from Marcus Freeman. But I do like him as a coach, and I do think he's going to be great enough at Notre Dame for the next 3 to 5 years, where this will definitely be a certainty in 3 to 5 years.
And also, it's just like, do you really want to coach the Bears?
I mean, at this point, they say it's a hot job, but right now, with where the organization is, I think it's anything but at the moment.
I mean, it's a step above coaching the Jets, I would say. It's like a step above that. And yeah, I totally agree with what you guys are saying, with both of you guys.
It's bad. I can't even remember the player, but it's bad when a former NFL player goes on a podcast and says, yeah, like when I was on the Bears for like a season, we up like zero energy at all. Like people were just cold, and I don't know. I mean, when you have former players saying that about the organization who didn't last long, that probably tells you all you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think he should stay in college because he's still building his legacy as a college head coach a little bit.
It's not even remotely done yet.
And I think he has a lot of potential in college. I think he can win it. I don't think it's going to happen this year, as we all said, but I think he can end up winning a national championship at Notre Dame eventually. And that hasn't happened since 1988. So right. I think he actually, and with the 12-team playoff, he's in it every year. Notre Dame's in it every year. I mean, they were in it this year and lost to Northern Illinois. So there's a good chance under Marcus Freeman, they're going to be in it every year.
Every year during this iteration of the 12-team playoff, I could see Notre Dame making it every single year. Yeah.
Or at least they have a good enough chance to make it every year. And if they don't, it's going to be a disappointment. So most years they're at least going to make it. I do want to talk about this a little bit. It's about the Army-Navy game. And the question is, should Army-Navy be moved to week 1? I don't know if you saw this.
I did.
So Paul Feinbaum said it, and that's kind of what made news. But actually, the first person to suggest this was Joel Klatt.
I did see that. It was Joel Klatt, yeah.
He was the first person to suggest this and move the Army-Navy game to week 1. And in a weird way, Army-Navy is sort of a radioactive college football topic. Like, if you suggest any changes to the Army-Navy game at all, if God forbid.
I'm just going to say it outright. I don't think I just feel like Army-Navy is just one of those games you don't touch. Even with the evolution of the sport, even with the expanded playoff, it's been on the same weekend every year for God knows how long. I mean I think it's cool from a solo game perspective, but to move it forever to the first week, I just don't. I'm one of the few people that believes that it should stay where it is. It's the first week of December. Everyone knows that after rivalry week boils over, that's the game that's the holdover, before the bowl season. And now that we're in this expanded playoff, that's simply how I view it.
Look, I noticed a lot of people, and like I said, I think it seems like a very radioactive topic. Like if you suggest any changes, if you say I think it should be a 7:00 game instead of a 3:30 game, people are like, you don't respect the troops. like there's a whole lot of nonsense with that,
right?
And with the Army-Navy game, and I think that Joel Klatt and Paul Feinbaum really kind of have a point. I really think they kind of have a point with this, with moving the Army-Navy game to week 1. I think it would be a good opener to the season. I think that I think the game would mean a lot more if the game was played week 1 than the last week of the season. I mean, outside of the whole rivalry between Army and Navy, at that point, the game doesn't even really mean that much. Usually the season's kind of over for both teams at that point, as opposed to now that in today's era, I think it might make more sense to play. I mean, just because they've played it after rivalry week for the longest time doesn't mean it makes the most sense now. Like, I don't get why it's such a big deal and I do think it should be a standalone game. I'm not saying it should be just any other week, but having it week 1, if the week 0 game was Army-Navy and that's how you started the season, I think that's better than Florida State and Georgia Tech playing as the week 0 game. Like, I think that would be a better, in a lot of ways, I think that's true. And it's also like this weird place where it's like, all right, we go from rivalry game to rivalry week to a total week off, and then we get into the bowl games. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense the way it's currently structured.
From that perspective, I could see it, but I think you would need a lot of decision makers to.
I'm not saying that. Yeah, I'm not saying I think they're going to do it, but it makes
I'm just saying. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, I agree, Nick. I think the game should be the week 0 game. I mean, at that point, we haven't had college football for 9 months. That's when people are the most starving and desperate for football. I mean, week 0, I mean, you'll watch San Jose State against Buffalo. I mean, you don't care who's playing that week.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get college football, big games every single week, and then you get Army Navy, I mean, pretty much at that point, you've been flushed with so many good football games. Majority of the time, people don't even care about it. I mean, more people talk about the Heisman Trophy ceremony than they do about the Army Navy game. So I would like this to be the week 0 game. Also, you know, you don't know what these teams are going to be, so it makes the matchup way more interesting because you don't know what players are going to break out for either team. They won't be able to game plan for it, so it should make a much more interesting game. Plus, they'll be much more fresh. They'll have less injuries. They'll pretty much be at full health on both squads. So I think it's a no-brainer. I do think it should be moved, but I know college football doesn't like to break traditions, so I don't see it being moved. But I agree it should be.
Yeah, because I don't understand why it's a given that it has to be that week. That I don't get. Like, I do think it should be its own game with no other games going on. I do think that. But to me, it's just like the tradition of playing it in like the first week of December. I mean, like, why is that a given? And by the way, I've talked about on this podcast that I don't like the Army, that I can't stand the Army-Navy game because all it does is remind me that the college football season is almost over. And like you said, it's right after we watched a whole lot of like amazing college football, so many amazing games throughout the season, including the week before, which is rivalry week. Then we see the Army-Navy game play, and we're just like, I don't know. It's not the same level as those other games because we're comparing it like that, as opposed to if that's the week 0 game, we're like, wow, college football is finally back. I think the game would mean more. I think that would make a lot more sense, honestly. But the problem is, I think that too many people are just married to that idea, to the idea that it has to be that week. That has to be after rivalry week, even though in today's era, it makes the least amount of sense. I would say, all right, so we're towards the end of the show, which is, of course, another edition of Unnecessary Wagers. This wager was extra unnecessary. So, Emeka Ibuka, 70 or more receiving yards. Riley Leonard, 50-plus rushing yards. Jeremiah Love, 50-plus rushing yards. Travion Henderson, 80 or more rushing yards and as an anytime touchdown scorer. Ohio State, minus 8.5. Jadarian Price, 25 or more rushing yards. Jeremiah Smith and Quinshon Judkins as anytime touchdown scorers, and Quinshon Judkins for 70 or more rushing yards. Ohio State for over 28.5 team total points. Ohio State, the last team to score. Jeremiah Love as an anytime touchdown scorer, and Jeremiah Smith, 80 or more receiving yards.
Interesting.
The only thing I'm surprised about that you didn't bet on the coin toss as well.
I don't think they didn't give me that option. I wonder if they didn't give me the option to bet on the national anthem either. Imagine parlaying the national anthem with like a Quinshon Judkins touchdown or something like that.
I thought it would be like the Super Bowl being the national championship.
Yeah, I don't think you can bet on the national anthem anymore. Or maybe you can, but maybe I don't know if they let you do it on DraftKings.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I bet it was $1 to win 1,000 in one game, and that's the last one. I think that might be the last unnecessary wagers of the year. I don't know how I'm gonna do an off-season one. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Forever Power 5. I think we should be back next week. So enjoy the national championship, everybody.
Have a good one. Enjoy the game.